Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Use the hashtag DisrupTV to ask Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests any questions you have live, and we'll do our best to answer them live and certainly get back to you after the show. It's my privilege to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business. He's a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, ZDNet, and more I see him on Fox Business and CNBC and Bloomberg, so he's now a television personality. And in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. Vala is, as you know, my co-host, but more importantly, he's one of the top followers on Twitter for CMOs, CIOs, and also about life and business at the same time. He's a published author as well, and of course, a regular television celebrity in the business press. But more importantly, we're not here to talk about ourselves. We're here to talk about what is happening in the market. And today we've got a very, very special guest, someone that left the industry analyst world and is now over at a very special company. Vala, who do we have?
It's our privilege and an honor. I've been trying hard to get Michael on the show, and we're so happy to have Michael Maoz, Senior Vice President of Innovation Strategy at Salesforce, the world's largest provider of CRM software and services. Michael is one of the creators in the CRM space, beginning in Europe, where he was part of the first global CRM software company in the world. Prior to Salesforce, Michael was a distinguished analyst and research fellow, and there's only a handful of those at Gartner, where he was one of the founders of CRM and customer experience practice. Michael has spoken at business and technology conferences on 5 continents and works with business leaders of the world's largest businesses and governments, helping them with digital transformation and building experiences that delight all stakeholders. You can follow Michael on Twitter at MIMAOZ. Welcome, Michael, to DisrupTV.
Thanks for having me today. It's great.
Hey, Michael, I remember briefing you in 2003 at Bridges Restaurants in Danville when I was at PeopleSoft, way back.
Way back.
So, I mean, you've been one of the early pioneers in the CRM business. We are now moving to an intersection of CX plus AI, CX, augmented reality, CX plus, a whole bunch of things that are creating these areas that are like ambient experiences. Where do you see this future heading? Because we've been talking about CRM since like 97 when it was front office, and then suddenly you guys called it CRM.
Yeah, it's been crazy. There's been a lot happening, and though sometimes I'll meet a CIO or I'll meet a head of sales, and they'll say, "Really, has anything changed?" Because really, you're still trying to do the same thing. You're trying to figure out what's in the head of the customer, and that hasn't changed. You're trying to build relationships with them when they're always changing, when you really can't get your finger on the pulse of who they are and what they are. So in some ways, it really hasn't changed at all. But a lot of things have changed. And some of the technologies that I think when I started out, Al Gore had not even invented the internet, right? Let's face it. So we were working on phone-based systems only. And that's all, that's basically, you could help the store or you could help the phone, but that was about it. So today, you're looking at some of the things you have, some of the great data visualization tools, just amazing. You can take tremendous amounts of data and in real time see trends, see where people are moving. You can also look at emotion detection or voice detection. You see, I can tell right now, your face might be saying you're actually cool and happy, but image recognition to not so much, or 4 seconds of your voice and I can say, he's really upset with me, or he's really tense for some reason, or he's very chill and it's a good time to make an offer. None of that stuff. Or identity location systems, voice-driven systems, which are being used tremendously, integrated with things like bots. And you see companies like American Express or Comcast or a dozen others having the entire support process driven through AI, great integration with back-end systems and voice. And then maybe the other one which I'm seeing coming up, maybe get a chance to talk about later, is some of this ambient stuff and augmented reality, both of which are very, very cool.
It's amazing. So, you're talking about companies that are trying to build their sense and response capabilities by this combinatorial effect of leveraging technologies like Internet of Things and machine learning and computer visioning and social and mobile. But at the same time, in this age of connected customer, this hyper connected knowledge sharing economy, there's more and more concern or mindfulness in terms of implications, in terms of ethics and trust and privacy and environment. So as you guide CEOs of some of the biggest companies and governments around the world, how do you talk to them about this balancing act where the shareholder wants profit, but the innovators, trailblazers, need a safe space and ample time to experiment and iterate and build processes, perhaps at the expense of short-term profitability? So how do they do that? Like, how do you, it seems like a delicious paradox, and unless you find a balance, you're not going to be able to stay relevant.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we talk about the CXO, but those X's really matter in the X's and O's, right? Because if a CEO lacks clout with the board, you're not going to get very far. Or sometimes you have CEOs who are really crafty about, they go directly out past the shareholder. They go right out to the direct customer. Think about people like Apple or, I don't know, Southwest Air or Starbucks, Qualcomm, EMC, even Salesforce, right? They go straight out and they make their case. I remember famously Bezos, when he had shown $250 million in spend on no questions asked return. And the shareholders said, hey, what about that $250 million? What are you going to do about it? And you say, well, I'm hoping you'll dump my shares so I can get rid of people like you who are holding me back.
Or like the $2 billion same day prime or next day prime. I mean,
yeah. So either you have that strong connection with the customer and the board respects that, or you have the shareholders who fear that, or you have to keep your head down and go a lot slower. You have to iterate a lot slower. You have to show the value that you've created. And there you can use that kind of iterative process to get things done, but the pacing is going to be a lot slower.
And then and a follow-up with the CIO. What about the CIO? Does she still have the opportunity to really be the catalyst and the person that helps the CEO execute a vision?
Did they ever? I mean, weren't they really the people who kept the lights on, the plumbing going, and you know, think about their? And I don't mean that to say anything negative about them, but their job is so all-encompassing. You know, scale and security and privacy and fraud. The things that are on their shoulders as an information officer, right? Anything goes wrong, they lose their job. So this is like, what's the discretionary budget or headset that the CIO gets when he, she, or they are speaking to anyone to get anything done? Where's their clout? So you do see these really innovative CIOs, but it tends to come from that kind of legitimacy that's been given to them by the board and by the CEO.
Right.
Wow, we're definitely seeing this, this intersection, right? I mean, we had this, tussle that was going on, and CDOs and CIOs and CMOs. Almost 10 years ago, Esteban and I kind of got out into a conference in Italy talking about the CMO-CIO struggle, which eventually got to these conversations around what was happening with these chief digital officers. But right now, it seems like, the delineation seems to be blurred. Right. So when we talk about these experiences, like even the CFO is talking about customer experience, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know if you're seeing that as well, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see it. And it's so much dependent on the company. You know,
company culture. Yep.
Companies, and you like, for example, Gartner every year puts out a survey on the CIO and the CFO, and you look at where they are in the pecking order, and generally CIO is number 5. Right. So it's like, well, good luck with that on the customer experience change front. You're expected to be the chief digital officers talking to you, chief, like you said, data officer, marketing officer, and basically CEO is like, look, I just want you to grow and grow profitably and make the customers all love us and shareholders, and that makes the CIO's job often very, very difficult because they don't really have the gravitas or clout in all businesses. They do in some, which is self. You see those, but in most, if you're not doing this kind of collaboratively, it's really a team effort. When the team gets together, you really see things happening.
Absolutely.
Got it. So related to this, who are some of the companies that are doing this right? I really get it, right? At the cultural level, understanding the technology landscape, understanding the type of people to hire and bring on board, right? And really understanding how to deliver on the brand promise. Who's doing that well?
Well, I mean, I know our company does, Salesforce. One of the reasons I joined, because I really see they put their money where their mouth is and they do things for long term. But you go around the world and you see different companies. Like I was in UK, Yorkshire Bank. they're really amazing. From understanding how pensioners are doing things, or people who are homebound because they might be whatever in some way mobily limited, or they look at the journey paths of the key segments and they know, this one's going to use the mobile app, this one's going to use the website, this one's going to have to come in. Or for this process, that same person who would use the mobile app for one thing is going to have to come in and have a phone call, or is going to have to sit in front of us, or we're going to have to go out to them. You see Capital One, and it's famous, DC and Philly, where they put the coffee machines, the whole barista station right next to the place. Yep. So they know that a younger demographic is kind of afraid of banks. Or Vanguard. I mean, Vanguard's a great company. Trader Joe's. You walk into Trader Joe's. Who doesn't? Yep. They know everything about you. They know you're not interested in really funky cheese. Go to Putney, Vermont, and watch the goat get milk if you will. But for Trader Joe's, they understand. Australia, I was at Pacific Fair Shopping Center. It's one of the craziest places. You're walking to a shopping center, but it's not a shopping center with 120 vendors. It's a organism. It's just one group. They act as one, even though there are 120 separate entities. Or here in the United States, Amica Insurance, if you ever looked at them, check them out. Amazing customer service, just mind-blowing. And everything is integrated. They get right out to you. Of course, famously, Warby Parker. Right? Unbelievable. And maybe Nordstrom's. Retail's really, really hard, and they do a great job. They still do.
All right. Well, local, where do you put a Stu Leonard's in that experience?
I'm going to pass. I only go in there, like, it's good if you're, I don't know, if someone's taking mushrooms or something, because I got to pass on that one.
We'll pass.
So, my company, our company, grew to a $16 billion annual revenue company in 20 years. And if there's a handful of people that help guide our company, you're one of those people. And you often write, and when you write blogs, I see that you combine life experiences, business experiences, and you give advice. In one of your latest blogs, by the way, I encourage all of our audience to look up Michael's blogs, incredibly insightful. Who can correlate jazz music to CRM and customer experience? And that was one of your last blogs. But in one, you said when you advise your children, in terms of trying to solve complex scenarios, you ask them, how do you get there from here?
Right.
And in the blog, you said the goal of an enterprise to be customer-centric, so understanding the customer intent to be our best selves. So you said, go sit with the customer care or tech support or billing or returns folks, the ones who need to accomplish the goal of delivering great customer experience, and then ask yourself, how do we get there from here?
Yeah.
How often do you feel that the executives that you coach and advise and companies that you consult with take the time to understand where they are and where they need to be? And can you expand on that thesis?
Yeah, it's something that it's hard for them to do because we talked about this short-termism. And when you sit with someone, and I ask, like, who is they? When you talk about, they're going to do this or we're going to do this, then who's the we? You have this kind of continuity. When I worked at Gartner, one of the amazing things, we went from being very poor customer service to being one of the best in the world because we had a new CEO, guys, Gene Hall. And basically he did this, let's go outside in. Why don't we go outside and ask the clients, why do you buy our services? Why do you go to our conferences or not go? What do you like or not like about our pricing? And so, oh, gee, that's Novell. Let's go ahead and then let's prioritize it. And now the final thing is, let's put metrics on the chest of every person in the entire company. Literally, you're walking around and you know your metrics, and at any time there's complete transparency around them. So there's no, gee, I wonder what my role is in becoming that customer-centric organization. What do you want to know? We've decided on the metrics. You've bought into the metrics. You can see they're codified. So I can go and see that you're average among your peer group, or you're below average. So maybe it's time I left for something else. Not why I left, by the way. Could have been, who knows? But that idea of let's get real. Let's do this kind of radical transparency. And by the way, if you want to see a lot about that, go read Ray Dalio's Principles. He ran an entire company based on radical transparency. And I think that's an amazing thing. Radical truth, radical transparency in business and your personal life. And to get to where you're going, and I'm going to stop in a minute, but I know we have limited time, but I sat with Clay Christensen a couple of years ago. We were talking about his book that he came out with, Competing Against Luck. And that was really like the stuff that I was writing about in the intent-driven enterprise. Like, what is my intent as a business? It's to take all of your money, right? That's what I'm there for. But I have to do that in symmetry with what's your intent. Why do people spend stupid money for some objects and say, that's great, let me spend more? Like Apple products. My kids just couldn't wait for that damn Apple thing. Oh, gee, it broke, slam. I can't wait to spend $1,000 on something it probably costs $150, right? Because my intent is to build the brand of me, not Apple, but me. And my brand is intrinsically wrapped around it. So that idea, they got my intent and they work towards it. So I'm okay with that, right? So that is something great. And what Clay said in that is you're competing against luck usually, instead of what's the job to be done? What did they hire you for? What did they hire you for goodness sake? They hired you to do X. What are you doing? X minus 20%. Well, once the other person does X minus 15%, they're going to probably flip and go to you unless you've really gotten to the core of it.
That's so true. Now, we had Kim Scott at our event last year on Radical Transparency, and she did a wonderful job showcasing that. But let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get started? Like, what got you into CRM and what happened before you even got into Gartner? Like, how'd you start your career in this area, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're like the CRM guy. So
it's really funny. Complete serendipity, pure serendipity. I had recently moved to Munich from Tel Aviv, where I had been part of a startup doing digital imaging. I mean, great. We actually created the whole concept of digital imaging before there was an Apple, for example. We found this tiny company from Caltech, these 6 engineers, and they became this little company called Adobe. And they knew how to do text, and we knew how to do image, and it became like peanut butter and jelly, unless you have allergic to peanut butter. In any case, I got to Munich, and I was planning on not doing anything but windsurf and read Goethe and whatever you're doing there. And I was literally in the hallway of a brewery, and I'm sitting on a keg of beer, and it was a Sunday morning, and these 2 young guys approached me. I thought they hadn't found their way out that morning, and they started a company called Point, and their idea was the point of the intersection of sales, marketing, and service. And that was in 1994 when no one had that idea. I mean, no one. And they're like, yeah, we call this customer interaction systems. And so a salesperson could see the marketing thing that was put out, and they can also see the service record. Service person can see the marketing offer plus the sales history. And like, what do you think? You want to work with that? And I said, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's like, let's talk about, raster image processing or something. And they said, well, would you be interested? And that's it. That's how I got into CRM. That was 1994, and this is my 25th year in it. And I can tell you, it's only gotten better. It's only gotten more amazing. Back then we're trying to sell it to Germans. The idea of customer service, Kundendienst, customer service. People pay for that, right? You're not going to get service for free. No, it's actually part of the experience. So it took a long time, but we actually did get some key customers like IBM and a few others to go global with the idea.
From RIP to CRM, what an interesting story.
Right. Michael, this is my last question. In another article that you wrote where you talked about what do best companies do in terms of delivering a great customer experience, you say they live by the ideal of good customer support by keeping the customer journey mapped and available as a visible living document for all to see. Can you talk to our audience about the importance of customer journeys and being able to deliver insights across the enterprise in near real time so that when there is an opportunity for you to add value to your stakeholder, you're able to do so?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? You walk in and this is like the Persian story of the elephant with the blind people. And it is true. You ask everyone, they've got a different idea of even who the customer is. Like most CIOs you talk to go, oh, customer, you mean finance? Nope. HR? No, I mean the one who buys your product or service. Oh, those people. Can I have root canal first? So basically, I told
wow. Would you like fries with that?
Fries. I just said, hey, look, figure out who the we are who's working on this customer journey, because it's so rewarding when you get it right. But take a step back. Take a step back from whatever echo chamber you're living in. And we're all living in an echo chamber, let's face it. So you got to step back and say, are we sure that we have our customer success priorities straight? And how do I know that? Where's the data? Is the data right? Who did you ask? Did you ask the customer? Did you ask our partner? Did you ask our non-customers? Did you ask our competitors' customers? Who did you ask? Is it right for the key persona we're trying to go for? And how do we know that? So job one is not to aid the competition. In fact, I'm saying that don't even look at the competition. Look at your customer. They're going to tell you everything. They really want you to do it. So, we work so hard on getting like our channels right and our segments right and that we staged all that stuff right. And like, okay, yeah, but it's just as hard or even harder to operationalize all that change. The people process technology thing is no joke. You got to measure it. You got to sustain it. You got to motivate people. You have to find out, you talk about customer journey, which is the critical link that's going to make or break the customer experience. Like, don't sweat the small stuff. The customer, yeah, I forgive you. Everyone sucks at that. But this thing right here, this is the key. And when that's mapped and everyone in the organization goes, got it. I get what it is. I get the sequencing. I get the prioritization. I understand the metrics. And we're in sync with the customer. There's no them and us. It's just we. And we make profit and they get a great experience. And guess what? It's a heuristic. And it's a successful heuristic.
Awesome.
Wow. We are here with legendary former Gartner analyst, Michael Maoz, Senior Vice President of Innovation Strategy at Salesforce. You can follow him at Twitter at MIMAOZ. Thank you so much, man, for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us. Great.
Have a great weekend. Wow. See, Ray, there was so much gold nuggets in that last 5 minutes. It was unbelievable. I hope it's going to make a great blog for me. Speaking of amazing gold nuggets and insights, we're now here with our second segment of DisrupTV. We're joined with Sonny Bonnell and Ashleigh Hansberger, who are authors of a new book called Rare Breed. Sonny and Ashleigh are also award-winning founders of Motto, one of the top branding and digital agencies for rule breakers and game changers. Ray, I think you and I are, we break rules. Sonny,
I don't know if we break them like they do.
Sonny and Ashleigh have been featured in CBS News, Fox Business, Entrepreneur, Chicago Tribune, Forbes, Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, just about every media outlet around the world. Between the two of them, they are members of the Young Entrepreneurs Council and have been on lists such as GD USA's top 25 people to watch and Inc.'s 30 under 30 and America's coolest young entrepreneurs. Just check out the background with the guitars. So, Ashleigh co-authored a new book titled Rare Breed, a guide to success for defiant, dangerous, and different. You can follow Sonny and Ashleigh on Twitter at Sonny Bonnell, SUNNYBONNELL, and Ashleigh at ASHLEIGHSNOTES, Ashleigh's Notes. Welcome, Sonny and Ashleigh, to DisrupTV.
Thanks for having us. I love how you did that full body, subtitle. It kind of shapes you up like that, right? Yeah. That's the point.
You guys are awesome. I had to reduce your bio. We only have a 20-minute segment. You guys have done a ton. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. Hey, welcome to the show. And guess what? We are live coast to coast on like some 20-some radio stations. So people are listening in as well. So just,
Hello, world. Hello, world.
Hello, world. So let's start about culture. So what's wrong with our culture right now that tells us to the path to success? Because you guys are rule breakers and you're really changing the perspective, helping people think about this in a very, very different way.
Yeah, well, we go into a lot of organizations within companies that we find that they don't stand for something. They're just kind of selling something. And I think what we're trying to understand and harness, at least in the work that we've done, is that many organizations just aren't walking the walk. They're not talking the talk. They're really saying one thing and doing another. And so what we've kind of exposed as part of this book is how do we go into organizations, how do we go into companies, and how do we teach them how to think in a way that is almost counterintuitive to the way that they've been taught and the way that they think the path to success is how you reach sort of the glory land, if you will. And so I think, so much of the world right now teaches you what you shouldn't be. And we're sort of saying, no, it's actually the opposite. You should be able to learn how to leverage these 7 so-called vices that are in the book. And we teach you how to leverage those to make them sort of your selling points, both in a culture, in a brand, or within your own career.
Very cool. So tell us about Rare Breed. How did you come up with the title, and what does it mean when you think about Rare Breed?
Yeah, so It's kind of a funny story. So Ashley and I started our company when we were in our early 20s. We dropped out of college together and started our company with $250. And a few years into business, it's a crazy story. We're celebrating our 15th year in business. So it's pretty awesome sort of journey that we've been on. But, you know, a few years into business, we realized that we were not following a traditional path. Everything about our business was unordinary. Everyone told us around us that we would fail. Who did we think we were? These two young girls coming in to start a company, had never ran a company before, and we were sort of surrounded in doubt. And, you know, those first couple of years of running the business and really trying to own who we are in an environment that was not supportive of that made us sort of feel at times often very defeated. And we had a lot of self-doubt. And we had a conversation with my father, who was also an entrepreneur, started his company out of a coal mining camp and started with much less money than I did. And, you know, kind of gave Ashley and I a piece of advice. He said, you two are a rare breed. Not everyone's going to love you. Some people may even hate you, but the ones who get you will never forget you. And that was really kind of the awakening aha moment where we said, instead of making these things our sort of negatives, how do we spin this into our positives? How do we make what makes us different and unique our actual selling points? And so we completely changed the trajectory of our business. We now work with brands as big as 20th Century Fox, with a lot of disruptors, innovation labs within companies. And it's all because of the way that our mindset was created in those early days have now become the thing that like people seek us out for. We have a saying that sometimes we're fired for the same reason that we're hired. And it's because of some people want that dangerous, different thinking, and we bring it to them and we walk them to the ledge and they're like, wait, that's like a long way down, risky. That's kind of risky. It's how we teach organizations now how to think like a rare breed, because a rare breed is just simply unordinary among their kind. It's the people who stand out. It's the organizations that stand out. It's the brands that stand out. And what they're doing is they're tapping into vices, the thing that everybody tells you not to be, and they're kind of zigging when other people zag. And to use kind of a cliche, but it's true, like they're harnessing the power of who they are, not just the pretty parts.
Awesome.
Wow. You know, we should talk about the vices, right? You guys talk about how vices turn to virtues, what they were: rebellious, obsessed, hot-blooded, hypnotic. I think I'm missing a few, but let's
there's 7. Rebellious, audacious, obsessed, hot-blooded, weird, hypnotic, and emotional. And what's interesting about all of these is when we were spending the time really trying to define what those vices were, they had to have a duality to them, meaning a lot of people would say, you're too emotional, you're too weird. And they had to have a dark side to them, meaning if you didn't know how to tap into them, they could actually be a sort of a thing that could destroy you or destroy your career. It could shut doors on you, or it could be the thing that opens the doors. And so that's how we kind of came up with the criteria for how we define what those vices are.
When you're dealing with an organization that's looking for you to guide their strategy, brand strategy, and leadership strategy, how quickly can you tell whether the person opposite you across the table is a rare breed, unique? They embrace, they celebrate diversity. They're gritty. They're thinking differently. How quickly can you tell? And what do you look for?
We've gotten pretty good at it.
You can tell pretty quickly. You know, I think someone who walks in the world owning who they are, you can spot them from 10 miles away. Awesome. And it's this feeling like that they're not ashamed of the things that make them who they are, right? They're not ashamed that they're rebels and they have audacious visions that everyone else thinks are crazy and impossible, until they are able to be tasked with the idea and actually be able to bring it to life. Only then are they celebrated. So, a lot of times, you can spot a rare breed immediately. Sometimes it does take a little bit of pulling out though. I think there's a lot of silent rare breeds in the world who are just waiting for the permission to finally start to own who they are.
So these aren't just extroverts. You can be an extrovert and
absolutely. Oh yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, because I think, well, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think a lot of people, like mentors, friends, even anyone in our life that has any kind of influence on how we think or shapes like our opinions of ourselves and of each other, you know, a lot of people we say and have seen that sometimes like one negative no or a shroud of doubt can actually keep people like a sleeping lion, like they're just kind of silent forever. And I think that the point of being a rare breed is that, yes, they are in fact rare, but I think there's more of them out there than we know. And I think they are in fact just not awakened yet, or it's not been activated, or they feel like they cannot be themselves. We just did a fishbowl the other day with the fishbowl app, and someone had come on and asked us a question in the fishbowl about that they were gay and they were afraid to be gay within their workplace because they felt ashamed of who they are. And I said, get another culture, get another company. Like, I've been in cultures where it is okay and you are celebrated to be whatever sexuality you are. And the fact that you're in an environment that's suppressing that and doesn't allow you to be who you are is really discouraging and disappointing. I think we've come a long way, but there's so much further to go. And I think when you go into a company, especially because we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies at this point, and when you go inside those organizations and you feel that there's love and encouragement and support and they're celebrating that diversity, it is something that is unhinged and uncontainable, and it's just like a fire through the organization. And then we've been in companies where who you are not allowed to be who you are, and it's really sad. So this is a book about trying to not only as a person unleash that and find that within yourself, but also within organizations to teach them how to look through these 7 vices and actually make it a cutting edge for their organization.
Awesome. Awesome.
This is amazing. I mean, we're thinking about this in terms of how
You're
people.
quiet, and you're never quiet.
Yeah. You could tell the wheels were turning in race.
Yeah, his wheels are going.
I know. I'm thinking about this. Like, you know, we've got this event. Like, it's in Atlanta. It's like the end of February. It's our Ambient Experience Summit. We're bringing CXOs, CMOs, and CIOs and CDOs together. I'm thinking like they got to think different. So I'm gonna talk to you guys later about this offline.
Yeah, please do.
So
We'd be happy to.
it's kind of huge. So how do rare breeds stay true though? Because like after a while, people get mellowed out. They don't have that edge anymore, right? You know, what do you do to keep your rebellious nature, right? When everything's all structured and it's in a project, right? And people like typically just follow the rules, and most people are conventional. Like, how do you keep that identity?
Yeah, I think it's practicing it, you know, a lot. It's kind of, it's a daily habit that you have to allow yourself to be fully step into who you are and not take the bait on those opportunities that start to say, oh no, your ideas are too bold, or I don't think we should go that way. Because the whole premise of these projects and within companies and the structure, and it's kind of designed to play safe in most instances.
Yeah.
And I think that rare breeds don't do all that well in those types of environments. And that's usually why they make excellent leaders. That's why they make excellent entrepreneurs. That's why they make people who become influencers and cultural provocateurs. These are people who need to step out. They need the breathing room. They need the limitless nature of who they are. And sometimes, depending on the culture of the company, they can't always thrive in who they are within certain organizations. So, you know, I think it's really important to make sure first and foremost that you find the environment and you find the place where you can belong and where you can be who you are, and if you're in an organization and there is quite the ladder, that your higher ups will support you and your ideas, even if they might seem risky, or they might seem bold, or they might seem too advantageous. You know, it's kind of turning the dial up on making sure that becomes more acceptable and more heard, because oftentimes the ones that break the rules are the ones who ultimately can get the power and move the world forward in so many instances. Yeah. So it's important to nurture this quality, I think, within organizations, even if they are not inherently rebellious. Find ways to become those things and not turn a blind eye on it, but find ways to celebrate that within a
That's sage advice. I think about when I wrote my book, I had a co-author, and when I reflect about my learning curve, the best learning opportunities during the process of writing a book was when him and I had a disagreement. On a recommendation or a prior set of recommendations. Yeah. There was a lot of that, but spirited.
Yeah, for sure.
Physical, but nonetheless, we had some amazing debates. What did you learn about yourself or your co-author in the process of writing, writing Rare Breed?
Just how strong we are.
Nice.
I think that we've grown up together. So we met when I think you were like 15 and I was 18. So we were very young. We went to college together. We dropped out of college together. Like, we have a very interesting story, and we had to learn the hard way how to navigate each other, because it was something that didn't come natural. It was something we've learned. We've been forged in the fire, so to speak. And I think running the company together taught us how to have disagreements and not always agree on things, but also our values are very much in line. So it allowed us to disagree and have healthy debates, but also like still know what we were fighting for in the long run. I think this book tested a lot of our tenacity and our perseverance. Like, the very first edition of Rare Breed got turned down by every major publisher, and everyone around us told us we couldn't go back with the same name. And because we're audacious as fuck, we were like, yeah, right, we're going, and ended up going to a bidding war. So, that was something that tested our tenacity and our perseverance. But it's the one thing that I think we've learned about each other is just how, like, now we're starting to see like what her strengths are, what my strengths are, and like we're now able to lean on each other in a different way, because we know that the other person is much better at something than maybe I am, or vice versa. And so you just come to the table as you are, and you learn through those processes how to become even stronger. And I think our book is a result of that. It's absolutely our heart and soul into a manuscript.
Very, very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
Now, there's a lot of talk about, are rare breeds extroverted? Are they introverted? Where do they fit? Can you be both, like rare breed and introvert? Does that happen as well?
Oh,
absolutely.
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
There's a lot of quiet rebellion that can happen. There's such thing as quiet courage. There's such thing as doing things that only you know yourself, and you're not screaming out into the world. So yes, absolutely. It's not about the fieriness of your personality and how introverted or extroverted you are. A lot of these qualities can exist within a very reserved or even a shy person. So I think that that is not the mark of a rare breed. Is if you're an introvert or an extrovert. There's so much more to it and underneath the surface of that.
And I think it's about sort of, knowing that those things are within you and then acting upon them. It's interesting. We created a quiz. We worked with a psychologist and a professor who helped us create a quiz where you can actually figure out what your vice is. And it's 28 questions, and you go online, it's rarebreedquiz.com, and we've had hundreds and hundreds of people taking it. It's actually been really, really cool to see. But what we learned through this process is, and so I was interested to see like if there were any trends with what certain people were identifying. And we've started to see a trend that people are identifying as emotional. And now keep in mind, in the business world, emotion is bad. Like, not passion, not hot-blooded fury and intensity, but like emotional. Like, emotion is something that you should kind of, sort of suppress, like, crying at work, things like that. And the trend has been in the quiz to date is that so many people are identifying as an emotional rare breed. And it made me think about, is that the political landscape? Is that just the environment, the world that we're in? Like, is that why so many people are identifying this? And why are so many people coming out as that particular trait? We found that there's kind of a primary trait, sort of a, most people are like, they're really audacious and you can identify them as audacious, but some of them have like a secondary trait that might also kind of be equal to, or if not just below, one of their main primary traits. And so it's been really interesting to see the amount of people taking the quiz and what people are coming out with, and to know that they're, that it's so spot on, it's because I've had friends take it and I'm like, oh, he's so that way, so it's really cool to like know that it's super accurate in terms of being able to say, and the quiz tells you like let's take obsession, for example. We talk about why obsession is an amazing trait to have in your life and your work and your career, but also what's the dark side of that? How can obsession paralyze you and keep you spinning your wheels and make you sort of non-productive? Like, what's the danger side of that? And then we talk about like different famous rare breeds and things that have those traits. And so far it's been really cool to see.
That's very cool. That's very cool. My last question, and that last conversation reminds me of Dr. Stephen Hawkins, who said, "Quiet people have the loudest minds."
Yes.
Actually, plenty of words that I consider rare breeds. What do you hope is the conversation after someone reads your book? What's the takeaway you want for the readers? Do you want them to be, combat self-doubt or imposter syndrome and be more bold and comfortable in who they are? What is that one takeaway that you hope that your readers walk away with after they read your exceptional book?
I want them to, I want to answer this, and I think Ash should answer this, but I want them to be thankful for small minds, because that's how the rose grew from the concrete. That's how battles are won. That's how, templates are shattered. That's how you become unapologetically you and learn how to temper those 7 vices in such a powerful way that it becomes the keys to your success. And I just want people to like really feel that it's not a traditional business book, that it's not something that you're going to get, that you're going to read stories that you haven't heard of. You're going to hear examples that you haven't heard of. For example, our very first chapter is fuck norms. Like, chapter 13 is like massage the octopus. It's like these crazy sort of aphorisms that like you read it and you're like, what the hell? But it's like we're teaching you lessons about what does it mean to massage the octopus in your life. What does that actually mean? How do you be diligent, and things like that. So yeah, I just want people to celebrate themselves and to feel like anything is possible, because it is.
Very cool.
We are live here with Sunny Bonnell Ashleigh Hansberger, authors of Rare Breed, a guide to success for the defying, dangerous, and different. You can catch the book everywhere where books are sold. They're going live September 3rd, 2019. This is going to be one of the top books of the year. So mark my words, it's going to be up there. So have fun. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you guys so much. We had such a blast.
Terrific. Really well done. Thank you so much. Wow. All right. We're now here at our usual cleanup hitter spot, where we bring DisrupTV First Ballot Hall of Fame inductee to come and close the show for us. We're here with Larry Dignan, who's the editor-in-chief of ZDNet and Smart Planet, as well as editorial director of ZDNet's sister site, Tech Republic. Larry has been covering and writing about technology and financial service industries since 1995. So he's an incredible wealth of knowledge, one of the most prolific bloggers. And you can find Larry and learn about all his works and publications on Twitter at LDIGNAN. Welcome back, Larry, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Where are you? Where's that background? Are you in New York?
New York, sort of, kind of, but not really. But it's
No
green
problem,
screen magic. It's a great teleportation tool.
Yes, it is. It is.
So slightly better than haptics and teleportation. Let's talk about what's going on, man. Let's catch up. So Q2 earnings, everybody's coming up. Apple was there, Samsung was there, I heard Intel, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. What does it look like? Is tech on a roar or is tech on a decline? What's happening?
It all depends on the sector. Apple's core competency really just seems to be making money. It's kind of like the rest of just but it's a services company now. They're selling a bunch of Apple Watches. Macs look good. I think what's interesting for the iPhone cycle is just going to be whether you get 5G devices. And the 5G thing's a little tricky too, because it's like hurry up and wait. Like it's not really fully baked anyway. But I don't know if that 2020 October thing for the iPhone, for a 5G iPhone, is going to work out that well. So there's a lot of questions about Apple, but man, they just print money. And all the giants are all doing that, right? So Google, Amazon, Microsoft, I mean, those three, Google's obviously an advertising company, but AWS and Microsoft, it's really about enterprise cloud stuff. Despite all the Amazon e-commerce stuff, I mean, the operating profit really comes from the cloud. So those guys are looking good. If you look at storage, we had a profit warning from NetApp. Western Digital and Seagate, they're calling a bottom, but it's just kind of bouncing along. So it really just depends on what sector they're looking at. And throughout the whole thing, there's this sort of current about China tariffs and cost of components going up. And, if you read between the lines of the transcripts and what's going on, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I think that's going to screw up hiring a bit. And there's just some caution. So, while things are looking generally pretty good in the second quarter and the third quarter outlooks look all right, I mean, you get the feeling like you're on this apple cart that could just tip over at any moment. And these companies are flush with cash. So it's not like it's Armageddon per se, but you're just kind of, we're on this apple cart. We're at the top of a hill and I'm just not sure where it goes. And it just seems like there is a lot of uncertainty all over the place, like whether you're looking at Europe, China, Asia, here, we're one tweet away from some big screw up almost every day. So at least for the stock market.
Talking about my tweets, are you? You're not talking about my tweets, no.
Larry's got, I guess, a special tweeting device.
Larry, if you're a CEO and you see this volatility and things bounce around, you're kind of like, there's a lot of psychology at play here. And I just think people are ready to get cautious pretty quick. So.
You mentioned Apple, you mentioned 5G. You talked about, the CEO seems to have a lot of enthusiasm about 5G, but yet in an article you wrote, you said Tim Cook was not as enthusiastic as perhaps the other CEOs, maybe more realistic in terms of impact of 5G. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of business leaders bullish on 5G and Gartner's forecast in terms of smartphone declines of maybe 2.5% this year? And what does all that mean in terms of, for example, next week's Samsung announcement? How much does 5G really impact some of these big players in terms of economy and growth?
Right. There's like 3 or 4 subtitles under all this thing, right? So the story I wrote this week talking about how Qualcomm was bullish on 5G. It's, part of that's they're like in stock market terms, they're kind of talking their own book, right? So of course, Qualcomm is going to talk about how 5G is going to help their financials because, their outlook kind of sucked, right? So it's sort of like, 5G coming in a year. And then you got, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, they're all talking up, 5G too. So, and then you get to the device makers. And Tim Cook is another guy who's just kind of talking the book, right? Because he's saying, this is going to be slow to develop. And I totally agree with that from a consumer perspective. And, he's saying it's going to be a 2020, 2021 thing because he's not coming out with new phones until next year that'll have 5G. So, of course, he's going to say that. So for the enterprise, 5G and Internet of Things and all that looks kind of promising. Like we'll probably see real pilots and real things going on, probably in the next couple of quarters or so. Yeah. For the consumer, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at my 4G phone. I'm not going to buy another 4G phone, but I'm also not going to pay a premium for 5G. So something like Samsung, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, here's a Note 10, and I'm thinking about the Note 9. Because it'll be cheaper and it'll, it can kind of ride out, until this 5G thing really works.
I was in a preview with the Note 10 on Tuesday as well. Actually, no, Wednesday. Yeah. Anyways, I got to see that thing, and it's without 5G, it's still pretty good. Is what I'm gonna say. That's all I can say. I think we're both under some bounded whatever NDAs. So, but
I haven't had that yet. But I mean, I've seen enough. The part about Samsung is they put you on these NDAs, but everything's leaked anyway, right? So my biggest problem with the Note 10 is that that SD card's leaving, which I kind of dug, and the other one is the lack of the headset jack. Like I hate dongles, right? I mean, I look at iPhone people and I'm like, for the love of God, and the Mac people, everybody's got a dongle for everything, and it's just too much. So now Samsung's giving me that, and I'm kind of like, screw you. So I'm kind of
hey, come on, this is how Tim Cook made his money. They print money because they take every piece of the value chain from dongles all the way to.
That's fine for them. For me, it's a pain, right? And And you know, the headset jack is kind of a big deal because has anyone tried to use a Bluetooth headset with a phone that's running on Wi-Fi calling? Like, it's too much. Like, it doesn't work half the time, right? It drops, it comes back. I mean, it's terrible. So it's one of those things where, yeah, sometimes you want the damn headphone jack because it just takes, you know, one more wireless thing to work out of the equation. So, you know, but the broader thing here is like, do I buy a phone now or do I wait for 5G to actually really happen? And that's a big question if you're a consumer because these phones aren't cheap, right?
No, we're talking thousands on these.
It is.
Right.
The analysis I saw, I thought was Samsung had 25 or 24% of smartphone market share globally. Apple had 11%, so it's 35. So 1 in 3 is an Apple or a Samsung. The rest are mid-tier smartphone vendors, folks like Huawei and others. Should we be watching to see whether these mid-tier smartphone vendors are going to take share from the two premier?
Oh, I think they're taking share right now. I mean, I played with the OnePlus. I played with a few Motorola devices, and they're all pretty solid. You know, my issue is I use the Note as a reporter's notebook. So that's the only real thing keeping me sort of in that Note camp. So that's, you know, that's an issue. But generally speaking, you can get a fine phone for, you know, $500, $400
or less.
The other problem here is the camera. Like, you buy those phones, there are some camera sacrifices to be made.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest issue with the whole thing. So you have to put a dollar amount on what your camera is worth to you in terms of how it works. And that's why I think Google's doing pretty well with the Pixel, because the camera, they kind of balance that good camera with price point, and it's a pretty good mix.
No, people are definitely buying the phone for the camera. It's number one use, right? More than anything else.
I just got back from vacation, and I'm so sick of Instagram boyfriends. Every time you just wanted a stupid picture of some landscape or something, and it's nothing but some couple, somebody's trying to do the supermodel pose over a thing for the Facebook or Instagram, and I just want to like wipe out the universe at that point.
All right.
Thanos and go like this. So I can
Changing topics for both you and Vala. All right,
yeah,
let's talk about the Corvette. Let's talk about the new Corvette. So.
Oh, I love that topic.
We were talking about topics, and the Corvette thing was there, and I was like, what the hell? But, you know, the end of the day, the new Corvette looks cool, but frankly, I don't want to look like I'm having a midlife crisis, so I'm kind of not.
Speaking about midlife crisis, Vala, what are you doing with the new Corvette?
Listen,
did you get the new one?
This is supercar performance, 0 to 60. They claim at 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Handful of cars that can claim that. It looks like a McLaren. Its price point at 60. Of course, you add a few things. It's probably towards 70. But speaking, I mean, it's a supercar that's priced for
middle-aged guys.
Yeah. Anyway, I love it. Here's the problem. It's not a.
I would love it too. I'm just, you know, I'm just midlife crisis wary at this point. So.
So you already bought your midlife crisis car? Are you telling me that?
No. Yeah. Hey, I'm driving in my daughter's Jeep that has no doors and no top, and I love it. So I have the ultimate Jeep Wrangler convertible experience. But that's really cool. The C8 is really cool. I can't wait to get in one.
That's awesome. That's C8. I figured it. When we're talking tech, we'll talk a little bit cars. But
yeah, it's a cool car.
Before we end on a bad note, we'll get to this first. But hey, Capital One breach, right? Any more? What's going on? I mean, I think at this point, should we just get rid of Social Security numbers? Let's start from scratch.
Or you just accept that your stuff's out there on some marketplace.
It is. The dark web tells me it is.
I kind of gauged okay, so the Equifax data breach happened, and I got wound up. I was pissed. And then the Capital One breach came. I mean, it helps that I don't have a Capital One card. That helps a lot. But generally speaking, I was like, you know, what's 114 million people? Like, I'm just kind of like, you almost expect it to some degree. So it's interesting, and I'll be very curious to see what Capital One winds up paying out, because, you know, these breaches are kind of like a slow expense bleed, right? It's you pay that first up front with a bunch of investigators and consultants and remediation, and then you pay consumers out. There's shareholder lawsuits. There's class action suits. It goes on. It's a 2-year thing in terms of before you tally up the bill, and then some of it's covered by insurance. So I don't know what Capital One will ultimately wind up paying, but I don't know if it'll necessarily hurt the company. It's just interesting from a consumer, tech reaction, because there's a certain part of you almost become immune to these things. Like, I don't know what kind of breach would really shock me anymore. 300 million? Hack all of China? I don't know. But the numbers need to be pretty big now. Like, I need 300 million to get me up in the morning now. And that's what's, it's interesting. You just kind of get, but yeah, I mean, the Social Security numbers, you really just got to wonder whether they got to find something new, right? Because it's obvious these things are all over the place. And now with technology, it all scales, right? I mean,
it definitely does.
Right.
It's very, very scary.
Right.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit, talk about e-commerce, and do events like what we just talked about prohibit faster, greater adoption of e-commerce. But I just saw Deloitte research that looked at U.S. retail, and it's a $3.7 trillion economy, U.S. retail. But e-commerce only represents around 300 billion. So about less than 10% of U.S. retail is e-commerce. Where do you see the trend in terms of, I've seen World Economic Forum projections that in 10 years, it could be up to 50% would be e-commerce. What is your sense in terms of growth and adoption of digital commerce?
Well, e-commerce is only going to go up as, part of that bigger market. I think the thing to watch here is sort of that this is why Amazon is spending so much to do one-day shipping. Right? And same-day shipping. And that's why they have armies of, contractors in these little companies with their little Prime vans all over the place. Like around me, my God, it's like a little army. It's like an army of ants every day around 7 o'clock or so, at 7 a.m. or so. They're just all over gassing up and
everywhere.
All these last mile firms. And once the shipping cost and the shipping time kind of line up, and that last mile gets more efficient, and you can get something the same day or a few hours, which is the case in a lot of places. But once you can do that everywhere, then I think e-commerce winds up being a 40%, half of all commerce sort of thing. Just because I think that's, I mean, I do it all the time, right? If I need something, but I don't need it like that day, and I can wait 24 hours, then it's fine. Sometimes you got to run out and get, stuff right away. But generally speaking, I mean, I do think Americans like to shop, obviously. So there is a generation of people that, kind of think going to the mall's a sport, or the outlets or whatever the new thing is, because it sure as hell isn't the mall.
No, it's definitely experiential retail. We're definitely seeing that pop up in the place.
Right. So I think there's a mix of things. And, I think we're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to tell the difference between digital commerce, physical commerce, and these experiences, right? I think it's all going to blend into one thing. We call it omni-channel now, but I'm sure we'll have a new buzzword in a day or two. But that's kind of where it's going. So I could see half, but I think the lines are going to blur pretty heavily. Like what's Walmart? Is that an e-commerce thing, or is it a physical thing? Or if you order online and pick up at store, I don't know. Is that digital or physical? It's kind of both.
The blending.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, it's all just going to be retail. And you see that with Amazon getting into physical stuff. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years, words like e-commerce and digital commerce just don't exist. It's all just going to be retail.
Well, hey, we are live here with Larry Dignan, editor-in-chief at ZDNet. You can follow him at ZDNet and, of course, Twitter at LDIGNAN for the latest of what's happening in the tech world, and more importantly, the analysis and the insights of his team. So, hey, thanks a lot for being on the show, Larry.
Anytime. I'm off to get a Corvette.
Disrupt immediately. You get a vet, and you're an automatic co-host.
All right.
All right. Now set a higher bar to the criteria of being a co-host. All right.
He's way too young to be talking about midlife crisis. Come on.
No, I know. All right, who we have next week? Episode number 158.
158. Aubrey's going to let us know when we get close to 400 unique guests. But episode 158, we have Timothy O'Keefe, Chief Executive Officer of Simmons Industries, as our first guest. We have Bill Shanninger, author of Beyond Performance 2.0, and he's also Senior Partner at McKinsey. And one of our favorite guests, returning back to DisrupTV, Heather Clancy, Editorial Director of Green Biz Group, herself co-author of a wonderful book, and just someone who brings a balance of business sustainability, emerging technology, and and leadership principles that we all benefit from. Ray, closing remarks for episode 157 of DisrupTV. And by the way, we are across multiple radio stations across the country, so tune in.
Thank you all for listening and tuning in. You can always catch us here live on our podcast here at DisrupTV show. You can follow us on the Constellation website. That's about it. Thank you, everybody, and have an awesome Friday.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.